Hello, my name is Megan. My Twitter handle is @FaedaMTG, PHAEDAMTG, and this is my Selvala deck. So this Selvala deck is built with a limiter of only cards that are legal in the green color pie. So this is taking current color pie philosophy and taking it to the extreme and just making sure there's as few bends and breaks in the deck as possible. So the deck is relying a lot on green strengths only and nothing that would be considered another color strength. So some notable includes and some notable excludes. Notable includes for the pile that I personally love is Momentous Fall. Momentous Fall is a reactive spell that lets you sacrifice a creature and draw cards and gain life based on the creature's power and toughness. This deck is really important to me in green because it's a reactive way to kind of salvage your creature versus black, which is the other color that would be primary in this effect, where you're being more proactive about sacrificing your creatures. The creatures are there to be sacrificed, but for green, they are here to be salvaged. They are here to be kind of used in a different way. The phrase "to use the whole buffalo" here would be a good example of how green uses these effects. So this card here is mostly to get benefit from your creature that would be dying anyways. Another effect that's a notable include is Tamiyo's Safekeeping. This card is here in place of Heroic Intervention. So Heroic Intervention gives all of your permanents hexproof and indestructible. This effect has moved into more white recently because white cares more about saving all of its creatures, all of its citizens under one umbrella. So there are a ton of cards in white that are doing the full team indestructible effect. So green is doing that a lot less to none. So the way that we get around that for Tamiyo's Safekeeping is it's indestructible and hexproof to only a single target. Also notably, it's a target permanent. Green is the color that cares the most about individual permanents, and it wants to save its biggest and best thing. So Tamiyo's Safekeeping is a perfect example of how green goes about protecting its best creature and trying to salvage from there. Other instance of notability, Return of the Wildspeaker, kind of in the same vein that Momentous Fall is in. It's rewarding having a big creature. So this lets you choose either drawing a bunch of cards equal to the greatest power among non-humans or buffing your non-human team. So this was important for Throne of Eldraine Limited and stuff like that, but this card is just super green. Non-humans is absolutely the creature types that matter because it should be playing beasts and worms and all that nonsense. So this card is the greenest way, I think, to both pump your team or draw a bunch of cards. Other slight notables that we can kind of skip through is I have a really beautiful Crozen Grip here. It's one of my favorite green enchantment and artifact removal spells. Green is one of the better colors at removing those things, and having Split Second I think is just the epitome of how green can just eliminate a threat without blue getting involved, and blue is one of green's enemy colors. So getting around counter spells is extremely important and extremely green. The last one's Jahir's Respite. This is just a fog that also ramps you, two of green's best things. In the Planeswalker pile, we have OG Garruk Primal Hunter. Everything about this card is green, from its extremely green casting cost with GGG to how and where it makes its tokens. So it makes a very large creature token. This is a difference from White's token generation, which generally wants to create a lot of 1/1s and 2/2 knights and things like that. Green's tokens are usually going to be 3/3s or greater. It can still make those small 1/1s and 2/2s and things like that, but a lot of its strength should be in its ability to create these very large chunky tokens. So Garruk has large chunky tokens written on it. It also draws you cards, again, equal to the greatest power, rewarding you for having that big baddie. And then its -6 lets you make a 6/6 for each land. Again, just a very green way to kind of create that advantage. Next up in the line, we have Vivian, Monsters Advocate. So this is a card that I really enjoy just because I like looking at the top card of your library as a future sight that lets you cast creatures from the top of your library. So again, just a permanent type that green cares the most about. And then it lets you put, again, chunky green creature tokens into play with counters. Green is also really primary in counter making alongside white. So the difference that it does is green puts more keyword counters on things. White is kind of going deeper onto the 1/1 counters, rewarding for just having a bunch of creatures and kind of spreading those around. And then the last one is letting you tutor out creatures when you cast creatures. So again, just kind of doubling down on the things that green does best. We have Big Mommy Nissa. I think this one is self-explanatory, but it doubles your mana whenever you tap a forest. Very green. It animates your lands, which is also notable green color pie. And then the minus just makes your lands indestructible and lets you kind of like flood the board. So love her. She's great for the deck. She's great for green. And the last one is, this is a lefty Garrick Color of the Beasts. Being left-handed is not green, but I just love this art. This is from the Secret Lair. But this one just reveals the top cards of your library, get a bunch of creatures into your hand, minus to put a creature into play. So putting creatures from hand onto the battlefield without like paying their full costs, extremely green effect. So all those Planeswalkers really key to kind of keeping the deck going. Take a look at some of the creatures. Most of the creatures in Selvala are going to be large and in charge because she really cares about having a high power creature for her mana ability, which is a great mana ability for green. It says you've already invested into this big creature, now you get paid back with mana to continue putting more big creatures into play. So some notable includes here are Uvenwald Oddity. This is an interesting way to grant haste to your team. If you pay the 7 mana to transform it, all your creatures have trample +1/+1 and haste. So this is a great way for green to grant the team trample and haste. Haste is the really big one here. Red is the primary color for haste, especially team granting haste, but we want green to have some way to like get their big things into the red zone. So paying a bunch of mana is one way to do it. Another way to do it is Surak the Hunt Caller. This one has Formidable, give a creature with power 8 or greater haste until end of turn. Give a target creature if you have power 8 or greater haste until end of turn. So this is single target haste, but this lets you basically give haste to anything as long as you've met that criteria of 8 power. So these two cards are really just a nice way to showcase exactly what green can do if it's allowed to grant haste. The next two cards are going to be the replacement for Craterhoof Behemoth. That's right, Craterhoof Behemoth, not a green card. It really rewards you going as wide as possible and then giving you stats for going wide. That is mostly a white thing these days. Green wants to reward you for having played large enough creatures that they just kind of run over the rest of everything on their own. So Pathbreaker Ibrex is an attack trigger that gives you +X/+X, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. Beautiful green flavor. And Endray's Forerunners gives them +2/+2 vigilance and trample. So this is the top dog to replace your Craterhoof if you're looking for something that is also less powerful than Craterhoof, less salt inducing, but is also green color pie if you care about that. But this is how green should be doing it. You've already got your big thing, just help it get in a little bit better. Two more cards for creatures that I think are funny and interesting is Birds of Paradise and Gilded Goose. Green and flying are two things that generally don't go together. In this case, both of them are mana dorks. They produce any color of mana under conditions, and that is extremely green. So this is one of those sneaky ways to get flying into green that I think is fine, but should probably not something you just see all the time. Old Gnawbone is a giant green dragon that has flying and makes a ton of treasure. That is a story for another time if that is green color pie. The secret is it's not. But these ones are super cute. They do the job. Gilded Goose also makes food, which gain you life, which is just a super green thing. So even though food are technically artifacts and green's not supposed to like those, this is kind of using them in a cool green way, which is acceptable. Speaking of artifacts, there aren't artifacts in the deck. There are very few artifacts that green has in its color pie, and I just don't have any of them in the deck right now. So this deck doesn't run any Soul Rings, it doesn't run any Mana Rocks, because those are pretty antithetical to how green creates mana. It doesn't create a man-made artifact that will create mana. It draws mana from nature. So that's why all the mana dorks are in the deck that are in green, because that is just extremely green ways to do it, and basically drawing them from an artifact that you make is not. Treasure is a weird one because there are ways to make treasure, and there is treasure that in flavor are not artifacts, but because they are artifact card type, I know that there's a little bit of like disagreement or confusion about why green cares about treasures as artifacts. A couple other weird ones for mana creation. Circle of the Dream Druid and Gaia's Cradle are essentially the same card. You might disagree. They're the same card. Totally the same, totally nothing different or strong about either of these. But these cards are creating green mana equal to the number of creatures you control. And you're like, hey, wait a minute, Megan, you said that green shouldn't care so much about going wide. And I was like, yes, that's true, but adding mana for creatures you control, it does tell you to go wide because you'll get more mana, but gaining mana because you have creatures is extremely green. This is how green would do it. So even though it's better when you go wide, technically you don't have to go wide to get the benefit. Any number of creatures will get you that mana. So you can break it all you want in the decks that you play, but this is totally within green's realm of possibilities. For a couple of sorceries that I find super interesting, my favorite ones are ones that put creatures into play. So my favorite one, and which is very on theme for the deck, it's Selvala Stampede. It's Selvalla's deck. It's got to have Selvala Stampede. This is a really fun Council's Dilemma. You get to vote. Everyone gets to decide what's best for them or what's worst for their opponents. And it puts creatures into play from your library or puts permanents into play from your hand. So those two choices, extremely green in both options, and the mind games of which one people are choosing is just good old-fashioned fun. Another one that can do this is Turn Timber Symbiosis. So this is just this is MDFC land. So this lets you look at the top 7 cards of your library, get a creature into play from among them. If it's tiny, it gets a couple of counters, and that's just mostly just a consolation prize. Normally green wouldn't care about those small things, but if you're paying 7 mana, you should get something significant out of it. So I would call that the consolation prize and not necessarily a bend or a break for green to do. The rest of my sorceries are what you would expect. A lot of ramp. Rishkar's Expertise, another one of those like Garrick's Call of the Wild Speaker type effects. Just let you draw cards for greatest power and then play a 5 mana or less card from your hand. This was a cycle. They all do kind of similar things, but none of them are breaks. They all do things how you would expect in the colors that you would expect them from. For enchantments, green is primary in enchantments next to white, but I just don't have a ton of enchantments here. I just let the creatures do the talking. The most notable enchantment, that's my favorite, is Unnatural Growth. Not only does it have just very green casting cost, it has the word double in it. Any card that has the word double in it, I just love for my green decks because I think that just shows the power of what green is supposed to be doing. It's just be doing everything more. So this doubles the power and toughness of all of your creatures during each combat. So even on the defense, you've got big blockers and big attackers. Just a really nice way for green to kind of solidify its dominance as the creature deck or the creature color. My other enchantments are Utopia Sprawl, Wild Growth. Again, just mana generators. They attach to lands, they enchant lands. It's just a really nice way to ramp, but it's also a very green way to do it. You are casting a magic growth spell on your land so that they produce more. Like imagine you are a druid and you're trying to harvest, you would cast magic on your crops to get a better harvest. This is exactly a green flavor and very green cards. I love these cards. And my last enchantment is Garrick's Uprising. Again, just tons of green words. Garrick is the greenest planeswalker I think we have. It's just, everything about Garrick is just green. So he cares about controlling a creature with power 4 or greater, and whenever you play a creature with power 4 or greater, and then it gives all your creatures trample. This is just a nice wrapped up package, but it is everything that green is looking for, and it's one of my favorite cards in green. I have an assortment of lands. Most of them are just going to be forests, which is one of my passion projects about this deck, is I want basic forests of all different arts. So I have a couple in here that are pretty neat, and I just like to pull them out, but all of my basic forests are all different art. I've got my Godzilla forest. This is, I don't know, the greenest forest I could think of. It's got a giant lizard on it. And I've got the beautiful Tokyo forest. So 2 of my favorite ones here just because they are absolutely gorgeous. And then I have a couple others that are just fan favorites. Of course, we've got our Magali lands. I love her, love all of her work. And we've got the Forest of All Forests, which is technically not a forest, ironically, is Yavimaya, Cradle of Growth, making all of our lands forests. Castle Garenbrig, letting you tap to go up in mana to cast big things and only works for creature spells. Very green way to do it. So that was it. That's the wrap for my deck. This is my green, technically correct color pie Selvala deck. Thanks, y'all. Have a good one.